Before beginning this video, since I will be talking about a foreign country, Iran, um, I know some people are picky about pronunciation of certain names. So I would just like to say before I begin the video that I will be pronouncing the Iranian Prime Minister who will be talking about Mohammed Mossadegh. I will be pronouncing it that way. I have seen certain sources state that his name was pronounced Mohammed Mossadegh or Mossadegh. He or crap. I don't know. Okay, let me be honest with you. I'm not really sure from what I read, and I'm gonna submit a clip from the internet that I found from Democracy Now. And Amy Goodman says that his name is Mohammed Mossadegh. That's how she pronounces it. I know it is spelled uh, Mossadegh and not Deq. So some people might be confused by that. I'm just going off of the sources that I found. If I do pronounce his name wrong, let me know if I'm saying it wrong in the comments. I'd like to be able to fully pronounce his name correctly. But I just wanted to put that out there. Some of the names in this video might be pronounced a little off. So yeah, I have no ill intention behind pronouncing the names wrong. I'm just not very good at pronunciation personally. So yeah, okay. Happy watching. I don't know.
You are listening to Democracy Now!, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On this 50th anniversary of the CIA-backed coup that overthrew the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Mohammed Mossadegh.
So I think one of the most interesting times in not just American history, but world history has been the Cold War era. And especially in the 50s, when it kind of first started, there were a lot of shady dealings and deals and weird, I don't know, just weird incidents that were mainly because of the US. I personally, as an American, I personally view the US as kind of a annoying girl you went to school with who's constantly in your business, even though it wasn't her business, but like she needed to know everything about everybody and it all concerned her. And when I read about America's history in the 20th century, they really give me that vibe of how they were so overly involved in everybody else's business. They kind of ruined things for a lot of people. And sadly, Iran is one of those countries that kind of sadly was ruined because of the US. And we look at the things that go on in Iran today, and it's really sad because when I was researching this piece of history, I was thinking about modern day Iran and then what it was like before the Iranian Revolution. And I really think this led up to that, the Iranian Revolution, which led to a totalitarian state and, women having no rights in Iran. And it's really sad. So this happened in 1953. And the US president at the time was Dwight Eisenhower. In the US, the summary of this is that the US was kind of threatened by Mohammed Mossadegh, who was the democratically elected leader of Iran at the time. And the US was afraid that Iran would become an ally of the then powerful Soviet Union. And as I explain this video, you're going to see that he was not a Soviet sympathizer. He really didn't have any business with the Soviets, and he was not pro-Soviet. So, and by pro-Soviet, he was not pro-communist. He just wanted to have Iran become an independent country free from Western interference. And the main reason for this coup was the fact that the British and the US wanted to control the oil production in Iran. And Mohammed Mossadegh, he basically said, I think that our oil production should be funded mainly in Iran, and we should be receiving most of the profits because the oil is being produced here. And I think that was pretty fair. And if that made him a communist, I it was so stupid. So that's the summary of this video. So a review from TexasNationalSecurity.org perfectly describes the compilation or the timeline of events, I should say, that happened during this coup. And here it states, on August 19th, 1953, elements inside Iran, organized and funded by the Central Intelligence Agency and the British intelligence services, carried out a coup d'etat, I don't speak French, that overthrew the government of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. Historians have yet to reach a consensus on why the Eisenhower administration opted to use covert action in Iran, tending to either emphasize America's fear of communism or its desire to control oil as the most important factor influencing the decision. Using recently declassified material, this article argues that growing fears of a collapse in Iran motivated the decision to remove Mossadegh. American policymakers believed that Iran could not survive without an agreement that would restart the flow of oil, something Mossadegh appeared unable to secure. There was widespread skepticism of his government's ability to manage an oil-less economy, as well as fears that such a situation would lead inexorably to communist rule. A collapse narrative emerged to guide U.S. thinking, one that coalesced in early 1953 and convinced policymakers to adopt regime changes as the only remaining option. Oil and communism both impacted the coup decision, but so did powerful notions of Iranian incapacity and a belief that only an intervention by the United States would save the country from a looming, though vaguely defined, calamity. I definitely think the US, especially during the 20th century, had a savior complex. They felt like they could do everything, they could save everybody, and they knew best all the time, which goes into my thought process of they're that annoying girl that you probably went to school with that, had to be in everybody's business. So, like I said, this was mainly all about oil and greediness. At least that's in my opinion. The US and the British were very greedy when it came to this. They didn't like the fact that they thought that he couldn't control his own oil production in his own country. So, of course, they got involved. So, yeah, there's that. So, who was Mohammad Mossadegh? So, here it states, Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh was Iran's prime minister, elected as such by the Iranian parliament at a time when parliamentary elections were in fact considered legitimate in Iran. For millions of Iranians, he symbolized Iranian sovereignty and patriotism. During his short tenure in office, April 1951 through August 1953, which is when the coup happened, he managed to implement the legislation which he had spearheaded in parliament that nationalized the oil industry, ending almost 50 years of British monopoly over Iran's petroleum excavation, extraction, research, marketing, and sales. And what I found really interesting was that he's actually a doctor. So his educational background. So in 1909, Mossadegh pursued education abroad in Paris, France, where he studied at the Institut d'études politiques de Paris. Sorry, I'm not good at that. He studied there for 2 years, returning to Iran because of an illness in 1911. After 2 months, Mossadegh returned to Europe to study a doctorate of laws at the University of... I'm not going to be able to pronounce that, so I'm just going to put it in. But in June 1913, Mossadegh received his doctorate, and in doing so became the first Iranian to receive a PhD in law from a European university. And Mossadegh taught at the Tehran School of Political Science at the start of World War I before beginning his political career. So I found it really cool that he was the first Iranian to obtain a PhD in law from a European university. So he went away for school, and he was really successful before he started his political career. And then early on in his political career, he was able to get elected to the Persian parliament at the age of 24, but he couldn't assume his role until the age of 30 under the law, so he was too young at the time, but he was still elected when he was only 24 years old. And in 1919, while protesting the new Anglo-Persian treaty, he temporarily relocated to Switzerland, but was invited back to Iran by the newly appointed Prime Minister Hassan Purnia, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, and became his Minister of Justice in 1920. Then later on, in the province of Fars County in Iran, Mossadegh was asked by the people of Shiraz to become their governor. So he was actually asked by them. So this guy was really well liked by the people in Iran, and I think he had a really good support base, and he was definitely trusted. So following this, he later was appointed to many different positions over the years, including foreign minister, and became governor again in a different province. This leads us to Mohammad Mossadegh's election. So on April 28th, 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh was appointed by the Shah, which is basically the king in Iran, and his name was Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. I think that's how you pronounce it. After being democratically elected by the Iranian parliament by a vote of 79 to 12. So, kind of like how people are elected democratically in the US and many other democratically ran countries, the Iranian people actually chose him. And as I said in an earlier article that I'm probably going to put up, he was very popular with the Iranian people. It says here, for millions of Iranians, he symbolizes Iranian sovereignty and patriotism. And says that he was very popular. So this guy was well liked by his country. He wasn't a dictator, and at the time, communism was very feared, and I really don't think that in a democratically ran country, the people would elect somebody who had those views, because let's not forget, they started to accuse him of being a communist supporter or sympathizer or enabler. A lot of times that's what you were labeled as if the US didn't agree with you. So Iran was filled with excitement, and crowds rolled out in Tehran, the capital, and other areas of the country to celebrate his election. He was very favorable among the Iranian public. And here were some of the things that he did while he was the prime minister. So he had many social reforms that he introduced, and this included unemployment compensation. Benefits were to be paid to sick and injured workers by factory owners. Peasants were freed from forced labor. Land Reform Act was introduced in 1952, which required landlords to put up 20% of profits in revenue, which would go into a developmental fund. And the money went towards the public work projects like public bathhouses and rural housing, among other things. And on May 1st, 1952, Mossadegh nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, abbreviated to the AIOC. And he put an end to a 5-year hold the British had over Iran's oil industry. And this is where the problem sadly started for him. But in my opinion, up until this point, I think he was doing a really good job, and he was truly just trying to care for his country and his citizens. So while Mohammad Mossadegh was drastically changing the life in quality for the better for the Iranian people, remember the Shah / what we would call him as a king, his name was Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. He was kind of canoodling with the US and the British. He mainly wanted Western support, and even though he was king, he was kind of forced to appoint Mossadegh to power. And it says here on Britannica that Mohammad Reza had been forced to appoint Mossadegh as premier. A 2-year period of tension and conflict followed. In August 1953, the Shah tried and failed to dismiss Mossadegh, and after riots broke out, fled the country. Several days later, however, Mossadegh's opponents, with the covert support and assistance of the United States and the United Kingdom, restored Mohammad Reza to power. So he tried to oust Mohammad Mossadegh, and the Iranian people were like, no, you can't do that. And he was chased out of the country. So this guy was not well liked by the Iranian public. And as I said, Mohammad Mossadegh, who ended up being the ultimate target for all of this, was targeted and chased out. And the US and the British restored power back to the Shah. So what ended up happening was that after Mossadegh nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the AIOC, and he put the end to the 5-year hold the British had over Iran's oil industry and tried to kind of make it more independent. This is when the problems really started. And I'd like to introduce you to Operation Ajax. So Operation Ajax was the 1953 Iranian coup that known in Iran as the 28 Mossadegh coup d'etat. Yet again, sorry, I can't pronounce that right. It was the US and UK instigated Iranian army-led overthrow of the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in favor of strengthening the monarchical rule of the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, on the 19th of August 1953, and the coup lasted for 4 days, starting August 15th, ending August 19th, and this all happened in the capital of Iran, Tehran, I should say. So, oil was the Trojan horse to get Mohammad Mossadegh out of his position, and the US preferred Mohammad Reza Pahlavi back in. So, another explanation for this coup centers on oil. According to historian Ervand Abrahamian, Mossadegh's nationalization of the oil industry posed a grave risk to Western domination of global oil supplies, particularly the oil concessions held by major Western oil companies in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Venezuela, and elsewhere. The coup was therefore necessary to restore Western control over Iranian oil and reduce the threat of nationalization in other oil-producing regions. So, in 1951, Mossadegh had wanted to audit the documents pertaining to the AIOC, and the reason for this audit was to verify that the AIOC/the British were paying Iran its contracted royalties and was seeking to limit British control over Iranian oil reserves. So when the AIOC refused to cooperate with the audit, the Iranian parliament voted to nationalize Iran's oil industry and to expel foreign reps from the country. Following this, Britain started a boycott of Iranian oil to pressure Iran. The British feared that the Tudeh party, pronunciation, which was a communist group in Iran, was helping and aiding Mossadegh on support with the nationalization of the AIOC. Mossadegh was not a communist. I'd like to make that clear. And when newly elected, was viewed by the Soviets, the same people the US and the British accused him of being involved with, referred to Mossadegh as an American puppet and viewed him as weak. So he was not involved with the communists. So the US and Britain did not like the thought of an independent Iran, which was what Mossadegh wanted to accomplish, and he wasted of foreign exploitation and greed. What? I'm reading from my notes. Basically, Mossadegh wanted to rid Iran of foreign exploitation and greed. By 1953, the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and the US President Dwight Eisenhower teamed up to plan an operation known as Operation Ajax, which became a coup to oust Mohammad Mossadegh from office. Before Eisenhower, who in 1953 had been newly elected, President Harry Truman had opposed the CIA-involved coup. His reasoning was that it would cause more problems, but the British continued to push for the coup, and when a new administration came in, aka the Eisenhower administration, he decided to support the British and their efforts into basically bullying Iran back into submission. So the coup took place on August 15th, and as I said, it ran for 4 days and it ended on the 19th in 1953. And what I find funny is that in 2013, after the US acknowledged the CIA's role in the coup, they released formally classified documents, and in those documents it was revealed that the CIA had employed Iranian mobsters to stage pro-Shah riots during the coup. So these people were not actually pro-Shah, like pro the king. They were paid by the US to pretend to be pro-Shah. They weren't actually in favor of him. Other men were paid by the CIA, and they were bussed into Tehran to riot and to just cause destruction in the capital. The riots resulted in an estimation of 200 to 300 deaths, and the military surrounded Mossadegh's house, and he was imprisoned for 3 years. And on December 21st, 1953, after his prison sentence, he was exiled to his home under house arrest, where he lived out the rest of his life, dying in 1967 surrounded by his family. After ousting Mossadegh, the US picked Iranian General Fazlo Hall. I don't even care if I get his name right, because he's horrible. Zahidi, pronounced Fazlo Hall Zahidid. Zahidid. Okay. Sorry. To be the new prime minister, which, because of this, the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was able to rule more freely and get his way, as he was firmly US-backed. The Shah ruled until 1979, which resulted in the Iranian Revolution, and we all know how that went. And as I said earlier, how the Soviets viewed Mossadegh as an American puppet. The real American puppet was Pahlavi, the king. So, yeah. It's really sad. It really is. And there's some background here. There's another article. The rise of Mossadegh, a 69-year-old Iranian aristocrat and prominent nationalist icon, revolutionized Iranian politics. Oil nationalization was the most popular political program in modern Iranian history. Support for Mossadegh and his governing coalition, the National Front, was particularly strong in urban areas among the working class and middle class intelligence, I'm gonna assume. Mossadegh was one of the first post-colonial nationalist politicians to emerge in the Middle East, and his program of nationalization provided a blueprint for other leaders, including Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, who would nationalize the Suez Canal in 1956. Rather than take sides in the Cold War, Mossadegh sought to maintain a middle path. His outlook, while largely pro-Western, okay, was neutral and emphasized Iran's independence. Mossadegh was also not a communist. In fact, when he first came to power, Soviet propaganda vilified him as an American puppet. Even so, Mossadegh was a challenge that the US and Great Britain were ill-equipped to face. So, in conclusion, oil is a dirty business. It always has been, and I think it brings out the worst in countries. America and Britain were so concerned with losing and not profiting off of one of many of their oil production hubs. They consistently bullied smaller countries into letting them move in and build bases and steal majority of the profits, which led to many of these countries never being able to fully go independent, which I think is the reason why so many countries are the way they are today and are in constant wars, especially in the Middle East. In Iran's case, Mossadegh tried to give Iran a little independence and paid the ultimate price. and he lost his freedom, and all he wanted to do was help his people. America is largely to blame for the way modern Iran is today, and it makes you wonder what Iran would look like today if America and Britain had never interfered in the first place, specifically the CIA. And maybe Iran wouldn't have an authoritarian regime, and the people would be free there instead of being beheaded for choosing not to wear a hijab. So, everybody, thank the Western world. Thank you so much. So, if you want to add anything to this, I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun researching this, and again, I know some people get really iffy about pronunciation. I tried my best. I barely passed French class in high school because I just have horrible pronunciation. So I'm sorry about that, but I find international history and politics really interesting, so I wanted to talk about this. So leave your thoughts down below if you want to, if you watch this video. I hope you have a good day or good night or whenever you're seeing this, and thank you so much.